This is a show that's very tacitly endorsing the idea that, police are very important to a healthy society, and you catch the bad guys and you put them in jail, and then society gets better. And if it's deviant behavior, it should be arrested and put in jail, and we shouldn't talk about it. And that's something that we've seen a lot of discourse about only in the last couple of years about, well, is the idea of the criminal justice system the best way to address some of the issues that we have in our society, especially when it comes to people whose behavior we deem deviant.
If you're like us, you may not be overly familiar with the 2000s TV show To Catch a Predator, but chances are you've heard about it. Originally starting as a segment on NBC Dateline, the Chris Hansen hosted program became a cultural sensation, drawing huge audiences, even as critics questioned its sordid tone and the ethical and legal issues surrounding the infamous sting operations. Although To Catch a Predator went off the air in 2008, the rise of internet entertainment sparked a wave of copycat shows, and Chris Hansen himself returned with new true crime programming on streaming platforms. Yet, with all the popularity surrounding Hansen and these types of programs, the bigger questions: should these shows exist? Are they truly helping solve problems or exploiting them? Have often been ignored. In his new film, Predators, award-winning filmmaker David Osit squarely and methodically puts To Catch a Predator under the spotlight, masterfully dissecting what it is that attracts us from these shows, putting Hansen and others in the witness chair and forcing them to finally confront the questions that have conveniently been swept under the rug. Highly acclaimed by critics, Predators is one of the best documentaries we've seen so far this year, and should be in the thick of this year's Oscar race. Join us for a conversation with David Osit on Inside the Arthouse, starting now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Lumley.
And I'm Raphael Sparge.
And welcome to today's episode of Inside the Arthouse. Today, we're talking about the film Predators, and we're joined by filmmaker David Osit. Hi, David.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'm crazy about your movie. It knocked me out. I really kind of left me unsettled and
little
really
shaken,
haunted. Yeah. I was reading that at Sundance that people, some of the reviews were that it was raw and that it was riveting, and I don't know. Is that the response that you expected from what you'd done? Is that sort of what you'd set out to accomplish?
I genuinely did not know what to expect. I went to our first screening at Sundance truly bracing for any kind of response from the audience and from myself. I didn't know how it would feel to show the film. It's by far the most complicated thing I've ever made in the level of emotions it's asking you to reckon with, and the gray area that's asking you to reckon with as an audience, as a film that also has you thinking ideally about the idea of audience and spectatorship. There's elements about the film that are far and away things that I had no frame of reference for. It's funny, typically when you're making a documentary or any kind of film, you're pitching it, you're talking about it with people. People will ask you inevitably, well, what would you compare it to? I never had anything to compare it to.
True.
I still don't know what it's like. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of it being unclassifiable, and that it's an experience I think people have never had before.
I know we talked a little bit before we started the interview about wanting people to discover the film and not know too much about it going in. It's a film about juvenile sexual abuse. I think we can say that, or people will know that, and yet it's not, ultimately. It in some respects, it has a similar line to your prior film in that your mayor, which was about the mayor of Ramallah in the West Bank, that you're wading into a really divisive subject and kind of coming right down the middle of the line and potentially pissing off everybody, on either side of the argument. And, is that at some level the role of a documentarian, to be honest and play it straight?
Well, I would argue that the film's not even about juvenile sexual abuse. It's really asking people to look back on a TV show to start off with, which was this television show To Catch a Predator, which was a very popular show in the early and mid 2000s, like the end of Internet 1.0 and towards the beginning of Internet 2.0. When it was right before social media, but right when we started to socialize on the internet, and which was a really important.
It's an important aspect of the show. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge element of the show, of course, where there's people posing as underage children, soliciting male attention, and asking men to come see them at these sting houses, where these men would then show up after having had very illicit conversations and sharing photos frequently on primitive social media platforms and primitive video, photo, texting. They would then show up at the house and meet an actor who was playing an underage child, who would then be revealed to be an actor. And then there would be a journalist, someone named Chris Hansen, a journalist for NBC, who comes out and interviews these men, with the men still not knowing why they're there. And then this confrontation would end in a dismissal of the men being told they were free to go. They would leave the house and then be arrested at gunpoint by law enforcement. And this happened hundreds of times with hundreds of men, frequently leading to prosecutions or to plea bargains, but leading to, criminal action being taken against these men. The film really starts as a look back onto what that show was.
And Chris Hansen became a celebrity. He was sort of everywhere. He was kind of he became a punchline, as well as also then like that's so Chris Hansen. He became almost like an adjective. I mean, he was
it's one of the first memes really in the history of the internet, was the Chris Hansen photo peeking out behind a wall, saying, why don't you have a seat? It's one of the first times that something pop culture on TV became pop culture on the internet, and because of the internet. And it was a closed loop, and it reverberated very loudly in American culture and around the world at that point.
And were you it's hard to say this word, but I'll just put finger quotes around it. Were you a fan of the show? Were you is this something you tuned into a lot?
I watched the show a handful of times, and I remember it very vividly. Fandom was the wrong word at that point, because it was under the guise of journalism, like it was a segment on Dateline NBC. It
was right, Dateline NBC. I remember that. It had that kind of imprimatur of news, hard news, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's before we all realized that a lot of news would disguise itself as true crime and vice versa. It was before we really fully understand that societally.
Or media justice, right. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the time it was, it seemed like it was heavy hitting journalism, it felt like, and it was on, and part of it, I think part of the appeal of the show was that it was on the news, and it was a news program, but you could not stop watching it. It had this simultaneous blend of disgust and humor and horror, and it was like it was just unfathomable, and no one had really seen anything like it before. As a congresswoman in my film says, upon hearing a deposition from Chris Hansen during a hearing in front of a committee on this issue, it's like Candid Camera, but with child predators.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I mean, even just saying that sentence out loud, it's like it summons all of the weird disgust and allure of the show.
You start the film with a I'm not sure if it was from the show or if it's uncut footage from the show, but essentially it was it's gut wrenching. The whole first 8 minutes of your film it's just it's hard to watch and it's hard to look away.
Yeah, the first 8 minutes of the film. Only mild spoiler, but the first 8 minutes of the film are basically from the internet, because there has been a very passionate, small but passionate fandom community of the show over the last 20 years that has been collecting footage through FOIA requests, through depositions, through NBC's own releasing of raw material. And for 20 years, they've been collecting all this media and releasing it. That's really what sparked my interest in making a film about this show in the first place. Is I would watch the raw footage, and I had seen the show, but then watching the raw material was this whole new journey for me. It opened up doors emotionally of me feeling at times when you're watching all this stuff play out, it's not cut for comedy the way that the show almost was. And you're watching all this raw stuff and you're feeling a little bit bad for these guys sometimes. Then you read a chat log and you feel disgusted at them all over again. But then you watch their police interview and you feel a little bit bad for them again. And this is what I've called a sort of emotional ping pong back and forth of trying to figure out what my sympathies are, as though I can label them, as though it's even possible to with something so complicated. I thought to myself, what if I can turn that into a movie?
That's a sort of, it's so thrilling, that idea of looking at this, the whole idea of sort of good versus evil as a binary idea, which is what this show kind of, is some kind of, again, creepy Schadenfreude, I don't know, horror of watching it, and you turn that around and you open it up.
Well, it's also, now we're looking at the subject, okay, fine, there is this thing that happens. Why are we packaging it, as quote unquote a news show, which it's not, because ultimately it's now being sold as entertainment. And what is that saying about the people who are doing that? And I guess also to some extent, what is it saying about us as the audience that's watching it?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting what you said, David, also about the timing of this, because I'm now sort of thinking back. So much has happened in the past, 25 years in terms of media. But this was, for me anyways, as I remember, sort of pre-Fox News and the vividness of how media can really, this was where news felt like it was telling the truth, I guess. We always believed that it was you were on the right side of news, I guess, in journalism.
To kind of frame the time period, this is post 9/11. So we're also, we're talking about a time with general fear and sort of societal malaise about being able to trust our neighbors and trust the society that we live in. It's also a time when we are losing trust in the government on a pretty massive scale in the United States. And that was a relatively new for that generation experience. We'd come off of the prosperity of the 90s and then into a very dark moment. And this is also right before the economic collapse of 2008. This was when our society didn't match what we would see anymore in terms of what was being beamed back at us. And I wouldn't say it was before Fox News. I would say it's adjacent to Fox News and the ascendancy of discourse around the idea that maybe we had problems in our society that weren't being addressed. And maybe it wasn't going to happen if police were the ones doing it, or if law enforcement were the only people who could do it. And one of the things that's interesting about the show, like Cops, this is a show that's very tacitly endorsing the idea that, police are very important to a healthy society, and you catch the bad guys and you put them in jail, and then society gets better. And as a result, that is what we can do. We can use policing to stop bad behavior. And if it's deviant behavior, it should be arrested and put in jail, and we shouldn't talk about it. And that's, I think, that kind of approach to policing has, of course, endured. And that's something that we've seen a lot of discourse about only in the last couple of years about, well, is the idea of the criminal justice system the best way to address some of the issues that we have in our society, especially when it comes to people whose behavior we deem deviant. I think another thing that's only happened in recent years in our society is a sort of mass questioning of the idea of, well, when you can turn one group of people into deviants, you can do that to another group of people. And it's not really hard to expand a definition of whether somebody is evil if you can have evil in the first place. As soon as you have the label, all it takes is brute force to apply it to certain types of people, whether it's immigrants or whether it's protesters. So this kind of show, this thing, it didn't invent the idea of good and evil, but it benefits from a worldview that has good and evil. And typically when you have a binary of good and evil, the people in power get to benefit from that binary most.
You really are asking us to go on a journey with you to do something very complicated, and again, in the best sense. I mean, again, I'm crazy about this movie. It's not what you expect, and it really leaves you shaken. Was there, as you were making this, though, any sort of ethical considerations on your part about perhaps sort of asking us to re-examine sort of these people who were involved in perpetrating, whether they were set up and whether it was media justice or not, perpetrating kind of this advance on young people, or at least to perceive young people. How did you navigate that?
I was constantly thinking about the ethics, not only of what the show was, but what I was doing. In fact, the kind of self-interrogation of this film becomes a part of the story. I'm turning cameras on a lot of different people. I'm looking at the people in this show who did the show. I'm looking at the decoys who were involved in doing the show. These were 18 and 19-year-olds at the time, some of whom had never even themselves been in a sexual experience before and are now being exposed to, illicit photographs and illicit conversations by a news program for the sake of their performance and being compensated a couple $100 a day to do that. I'm looking at those ethics. I'm looking at the ethics of the people who are involved in the program and police departments who are basically benefiting from having the show in their jurisdiction, but at what cost to the local community. Looking at the ethics of certain elements of how the show progressed and ultimately when the show ended and for what reason it ended, which it's public information, but again, it's part of the story that it ended with a very, very dark circumstance in one of the latter episodes of the show, which impacted the show there greatly. But I'm also looking at the ethics of myself and what am I doing in terms of showing you some of these stories and asking you to consider the ethics of some of these things and trying to spend time unveiling some of these images again and re-exposing some of these stories again. It's constantly on my mind, and I think as you watch the film, it becomes inextricable from the DNA of the story I'm trying to tell.
It's so great. It's such a great answer, and I imagine you're going to get pushback on both sides, as it were. As Greg was saying, I think the opportunity to sort of
offend all. Well, yeah, but
offend.
Yeah, but that's not about the film, and that's not about the subject. I think that's about a society that we live in now, where
I was going to say that we. Right now, documentaries are more popular than they've ever been, but it's a certain kind of documentary, I think, that's really ascended in terms of popularity. And it's the kind that says, here's the worldview. You're gonna sit and you're gonna watch this movie or this TV show or this documentary series, and it's gonna reaffirm the thing you already believe, maybe, which is sometimes a good thing. It's nice to be reaffirmed, but you may not change your minds. You're gonna get more of the same, and it's kind of affirmational cinema in a sense. It's like, the social issue is wrong, so here's 4 hours about why it's wrong and more people telling you it's wrong, and then you leave angry. And I'm not complaining about the state of these films, but what I am saying is that a lot of movies that we're used to seeing today, that we celebrate for being journalistically integritous and all these things, they are kind of just telling you what you already know and trying to affirm your anger. And I really wanted to make a film that tried to actually go in a very different direction than that and maybe make you angry at me. I accepted that those were the terms when I made this film. This is a film that maybe is going to upset you, and okay, that's fine. Why? Why are you upset? Why are you laughing when everyone else isn't? What is the difference between me and you even? And I think that it's a scarier place to inhabit as a filmmaker and as a person, but it felt like it was reckoning with the questions that I've been reckoning with as a documentary filmmaker for the last decade.
When in the edit process did the through line sort of come together? I mean, did you see that at the beginning, or did it sort of working with your editor? Did you kind of arrive at the idea of this is going to be a slow reveal? This is kind of a thriller pacing in some respects, getting you because a mystery getting to the end and sort of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to just kind of model. It's surprisingly linear, actually, the way the film in reality proceeds.
It is. I mean, it almost makes me feel like you knew where you're headed. But I think there's so much discovery in it. I know that probably wasn't the case.
Well, I needed to, I think, offer a very firm hand to the audience to let them know that there's someone that they could trust over the course of of a lot of, icky material at times, or a lot of material that could be alienating to watch if you felt like it was just being on screen for the sake of being salacious. And I needed to kind of make it clear to an audience that this is going to go somewhere, and you got to trust that it will. It may not be a place where you're always comfortable, but it will be a place that's always been thought of. I started the film really the same way I started production, which is with what interested me, like I said, with this footage from the internet, this raw footage from the show, and that is the beginning beginning, because that's the first thing that grabbed me. And then I start the film after that with the second thought I had, which is I'd like to meet the people who were involved in this, and let's go meet the decoys first. And so, it goes straight into the world of all these people who worked on the show, and it keeps deepening from there in terms of not only the people we speak to, but the experiences we have, and then the impact the show had on the world we live in today, which is not minor. And we go into that in detail in the film as well. The modern day vigilante predator hunting community, which is probably, I would argue, more popular than the show ever was.
That's so interesting. Well, that's just the power of the internet. I wonder if you've had any sort of real world kind of exchanges and or sort of feedback or online, either after screenings or how have people responded, I guess, to what you're asking of them, the journey you're taking them on?
I've had every kind of response I could imagine. I've had rooms of 1,000 people giving this film a standing ovation. I've had rooms of people shouting at me and angry at what the film asked them to consider about the rights of a human being, or the rights of a human being who's evil or who has done wrong, and how they should be less or more important than the rights of someone who has been victimized by that person. I have lots of questions that people want to go over. I have lots of people coming up to me and talking about their own experience as a survivor. It's been a lot of different reactions, because I think the film's designed to meet you where you are. I didn't go into this film saying that you're going to have a linear experience, even though the film is set up in a sort of linear way, going from the past to the present. The film's really about an emotional journey, and everyone's going to have a different emotional journey. I was really thrilled for that. I'm most thrilled and gratified by seeing the conversations people have after the film. The people who want to talk right afterwards are people I can't relate to. It stuns me when I watch, but 5 minutes later, you want to talk about it and you want to unpack it. And I do love that experience. And I think that the communal experience of this film, we're talking about having films in a movie theater. It is one of the most fascinating films to see in a movie theater. And I know it sounds like I'm biased, but it's fascinating to watch this movie in a movie theater because of the people you're sitting with, and everyone's going to have a different reaction from you too. And that's part of the experience of this movie. It's not just a comedy where everyone's laughing. It's also about the moments where some people are laughing and you're not. And how does that affect your relationship with what you've just seen? So it's been really rich as a cinematic experience. I've been really enjoying that.
I wonder how you're processing that personally, though, because it's got to be really hard to go from the standing ovation to the people throwing tomatoes at you, as it were. I wonder how you're navigating that internally. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that's a complicated thing.
Well, look, people are going to throw tomatoes at one moment, and hopefully they're going to come back and have a different reaction after they've really sat with it.
I've made films that don't inspire this level of difficult conversation and this level of, at times, frustration or confusion about how our feelings are being processed inside of us as we're watching. I've made films like that before. And I made this film partly as a response to that. I wanted to stir the pot. I wanted to make something complicated that felt like it mirrored the complication of what I see with our media landscape. I have a 3-year-old, and I realized at one point that I was reading a story to her, and I was, with my own words, saying the good guys and the bad guys. And I realized how insidious some of those narratives can be. And sometimes it's not so simple. Again, it's like, you don't change who you are when you watch a movie. But I like to think that you watch a film and maybe you get upset the same way that if you're a teenager and your parents tell you not to do something, you get upset. But then eventually, a few years later, you realize they might have been right. And I like thinking that this film could have a slower, more subversive impact on people. Maybe they won't like it at first, but that's okay. I'm a big boy. I can handle it.
I really, really admire you for that. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that.
We need more of that.
Yeah, I really appreciate and admire what you're asking of us and the journey that you're willing to take, again, on the receiving end, as well as and also what you've given us in terms of asking someone to tie a knot. Yeah.
I won't say that you're revealed in the film to be a private person, but obviously you did take some time. You are present in the film almost from the very beginning as an unseen presence, but heard. And and then we learn more about you as we go through the film. Are you prepared to be a little more out in the world as you start going into Oscar season? Because this is absolutely a film that should be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think I'm prepared. I think I'm prepared in the context with which I will be in this film, which is that I'm just trying to ask some questions, and I think I'd like to think that the way I'm going to have to talk to people is not going to be that different than I would have before I was in this film, which is with an open mind. I'm not trying to punch down at anybody in the film. There's no one I'm like treating unfairly, in my opinion. It was really important to me to be even-handed and to be open-minded and curious with everybody, even if I personally disagree with some of the things that they think or feel. It's an important way to live for me. And I like to think that because I'm offering that neutrality and vulnerability of myself, that people would ideally return it. And it also is helpful to know that I'm not antagonizing anybody. So if they want to come after me, it speaks to those sensitivities of this issue and of the pain that comes from all the things that we can't say and talk about in our society because of how difficult it is to address some of these problems, especially on a societal level where we're told there's one way to be, there's one way to live, and there's one way to do justice.
Within the journey of the film, you also, obviously Chris Hansen the show's no longer on, and it ended with some complication, which you again speak to in the film. But you also very clearly show the rise of this new kind of internet vigilante justice, which is people sort of taking
self-producing versions of To Catch a Predator,
right? Which is pretty incredible. And I guess I wonder if you could talk about that. I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fascinating thing is, we talked about the era of when the show was on, the early 2000s, when the internet was a boom, and now the era is such that the boom is content creation. Everyone can be their own content creator. Everyone can make their own entertainment and be part of their own entertainment. Everyone is now their own media network vis-a-vis their social news curation or their platform. It all feels like it's within your control, and it's democratized, for better or for worse, the way in which we can entertain ourselves. So I think that because this show, To Catch a Predator, was in so many ways entertaining and felt like it was rooted in entertainment, it stood to reason that a lot of people would emulate that formula and have now kind of created their own platforms for doing, for whatever reason that it inspires them, whether it's to entertain or whether it's to pursue legitimate concerns of social justice. A lot of people have created their own sting operations where they work independent of police agencies, occasionally with police agencies, but all across the country and the world. I met one of the people who, I interview in the film, this anthropologist named Mark Duran. I met him in the UK because he had been studying this phenomenon in the UK, where it's just as big. You have influencers working with, online predator hunting groups and co-sharing Instagram videos and doing this on TikTok. Some of the predator hunter groups that we've followed and spoken to and filmed with, they'll release a video which gets millions of views, like just as many views as an SNL clip on the SNL YouTube channel. It's very, very popular, and it's very enduring for the same reasons the show was. It's kind of it seems like at times morally uncomplicated entertainment that is stunning and shocking and compelling every time you watch it.
Stop me if this is something you don't want to talk about, but one thing you don't do in the film is sort of go back to some of the men who were caught or captured by Chris Hansen. The star of the show, as it were, the predators. Perhaps they wouldn't want to talk to you anyway, but just because you must have sort of wondered about that. Were they willing to talk to you? Were they not willing to talk to you? And what were your thoughts about that?
I tried once to speak with one of the men from the first iteration of To Catch a Predator who was arrested and convicted of the charges. And I found it really hard to try to speak with them. Like emotionally, I felt really conflicted about it. I wasn't sure how I felt about wanting to reach out and kind of potentially re-traumatize these people. 20 years later, I know because I've been watching and being a part of the fandom communities for the show that they are regularly doxxed or reached out to in kind of cruel ways, mocking ways by certain fans of the show. And I've seen now repeatedly that happening with almost all of the men from the original show. Well, not almost all of them, but many of the more, let's say, popular men from the original airings of the show. A lot of them have been reached out to over and over and over again.
So their lives essentially are ruined. I mean, they are.
It's a life sentence to be on To Catch a Predator. You're serving maybe a year in prison, whether you plead guilty or not guilty. Maybe you're serving a year or two of parole. Or definitely serving, I think, a 20-year stint on the child sex offender registry. But you're also serving a life sentence because these videos are online, and your name is your name, and your life is what your life is. The film doesn't go into whether that's okay or not. It's asking you to consider how you feel about it. That's where I wanted to keep things, and that's where I wanted to keep it. And so going back to speak to those men, it was a line for me. It was just a line for me, and there was something that I didn't want to cross. But there are other men that I speak to, and other victims I speak to, and other predators I speak to. And I think, the title of the film being Predators, I like to think that it offers a broader definition of the idea of what a predator can be.
100%. There is, as you discover, there's
Yes.
complex irony in that.
Look, there's a lot to think about in the film. Obviously, this conversation's also generating kind of stuff, and I hope that those conversations continue in the movie theater, whether you're present or not. I'm having images of, public executions back in the 16th and 17th century, and the idea that pickpockets were, like that was going to stop the crime. We're going to show you how we punish people so that will stop crime. And of course, crime was happening. And now we've also just created this whole thing where now punishment is for the masses.
That's certainly.
And have we grown at all, as, in human society over 3-4 centuries, and started to learn that this might not be how this might not be working. And the film, anyway, I think it does a magnificent job in really forcing us to ask those questions about ourselves.
So you went to Sundance, and were there other festivals that you were also able to go to as well?
Many, yeah, and it's been wonderful to share the film at festivals, but I'm really excited for the next step, which is to be outside of the festival world and to be showing the film to people who are, maybe just looking for their next movie to watch, and aren't seeking it out because it's a Arthouse documentary film, but because it's this film about the show, and we're so used to true crime these days that I'm hoping we get some really wonderful audiences of people who have no idea what they're in for.
I think you're going to have a lot of journalists also wanting to write about it as a think piece, and it again, because it's so provocative and such I think it will just naturally kind of bubble up with a lot of ink.
What is the opening date for the film in New York?
September 19th.
Okay, and where will you be opening?
Film Forum.
Film Forum, great. And you're going to be there?
I will, with maybe some special guests. You never know.
Maybe it's okay.
You want to expect Chris Hansen. And then it's going to be September 26th here in Los Angeles. It's actually opening at the Royal, which is where we are.
September 26th in Los Angeles.
Hopefully you'll be able to come out for that, at least some of the shows. For people around in other parts of the country looking to see when and where the film is going to be opening in their community, is there a website or place that they can go for information?
There's our Instagram page, which is Predators Film. And then, of course, it'll be released by MTV Documentary Films, so you can follow along there. From September 26th through the rest of the month, all around the country in cinemas. And then it'll be released on Paramount Plus in November.
It would bother me if I didn't ask you this question, which is just ultimately, did Chris Hansen see the film, and do you have any response from him?
Chris did see the film. I showed it to him before Sundance, before the film had its world premiere. And he I think, really appreciated the film. I think he appreciated something that was important to me in making the film, is that I really approached Chris with a lot of curiosity in the work that he's done in creating this show, which in many ways was this progenitor of this idea of what if you have journalism and law enforcement working together and creating some sort of entertainment out of that. And for better or worse, he helped create that genre. And we see it all over now. And I do respect the hard work that he has done to advocate for the causes that he believes in. And whatever our differences are, everyone believes they're doing good. It's nice to meet them where they are sometimes, but it's the complicated part is how does it impact the rest of the world and how does it make us feel about who we are?
Yeah, 100%, 100%, 100%. Well, thank you for making this film. I can't wait. I've told already a whole bunch of friends about it. I'm thrilled for its launch and for people to discover it. You've done really an extraordinary thing in making this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here today. The film, again, is Predators, directed by David Osit. It's going to be opening on November 19th in New York at Film Forum, and September 26th here in Los Angeles at the Royal Theater and elsewhere, and then rolling out around the rest of the country. It's definitely a film to see, a film to discuss, and one that's highly recommended.
Yeah, highly recommended for sure. Thank you, David.
David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Our show was produced by Raphael Sparge with on-site producer Norrin Dickerson. Supervising producers are Thomas Cassetta and Miles McCreary. Our show was edited by Gabriel Emily and sound mixed by Thomas Cassetta. Our musical theme was composed by Isabel Engman and Gerardo Garcia Jr. Marketing by Gabriel Emily. Show graphics by Jenna DeAngelis. Additional marketing and web design by Stephanie Peters. Filmed at the historic Laemmle Royal Theater in Los Angeles, California. See you next time on Inside the Arthouse. If you like today's show, please consider subscribing to our channel to learn more on Inside the Arthouse.